Hi, my name is Trish, and in this video I will be doing my first quarterly wrap-up. Early into creating this channel, I found out very quickly that I wouldn't be able to put up monthly wrap-ups every month. First, because I'm busy, second, because I'm lazy, and third, because I'm uninspired. So I thought that doing quarterly wrap-ups instead would be beneficial not only for my channel but also for me, because first, I'll only have to do them every 3 months. Second, assuming that I'll be talking about a lot of books, I'll have to be fast and concise with my reviews. So this leaves me room to make separate reviews for books that I really want to talk deeply about. And third, since I'll only be doing this every 3 months, it gives me an opportunity to do other videos, like
a few moments later.
So for this quarterly wrap-up, I will be talking about books that I read from February up until April. For the month of February, I actually had 6 books in my TBR for Black History Month. Unfortunately, around late January, that's when the news about the virus really started taking off, and that was all that I consumed. So I was in a constant state of anxiety, and it really affected my eagerness to read. So out of those 6 books, I only read 2. It's 4. Number-wise, it was very dismal, but quality-wise, they were amazing. So, who's the real winner here? No one. I don't know why I voted. So the first book that I read in February was My Sister the Serial Killer by Joakim, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. My Sister the Serial Killer follows Karud, whose sister has a penchant for killing her boyfriends, and Karud literally cleans up her mess because she's the one who disposes of the body and cleans up the crime scene. Things take a scarier and messier turn when her sister sets her sights on Karud's colleague, a doctor whom she's been in love with since forever. This was a wickedly dark and suspenseful book, but surprisingly also a very light and fun read. Despite being a very short book, it still has a lot of things going on. It's 1 part family drama, 1 part mystery thriller, and 1 part introspective dissection of Karud's character as she struggles between pursuing what she wants and protecting her sister. The entire time I was reading this book, I was basically playing Karud's devil shoulder because I just want her to be happy. I mean, after all she's been through and all she's done for her sister, she deserves a moment to be selfish. I also really like Joakim Braithwaite's writing. There's this very easy flow to it that I cannot describe properly. You know how in comedy people say that you have to have timing? That's what it's like with Joakim Braithwaite's writing. She knows how to build up suspense and fear and frustration, and she knows when to let all of it drop at the right time. The second book that I read in February was Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. So Poet X is a contemporary told in verse, and it's about Xiomara, who is gradually discovering herself and coming to terms with the fact that she might no longer believe in the things that she was raised to believe in. And so it's really a story about finding oneself and finding things that make you happy and help define you. I am so mad that God did not see fit to give me even just 1/16 of Elizabeth Acevedo's talent with words, because I cannot give this book the review that it deserves. Elizabeth Acevedo's writing is very beautiful, very sublime, and very laden with meaning. She knows how to paint scenes and worlds and make them feel so authentic and alive. She also knows how to write down thoughts and emotions and make them feel so visceral. She's just such a talented writer, and her prose makes me swoon every time. Every fucking time. Xiomara's character was also someone that I related to and understood at a personal level. I was raised very Christian, and as I grew up and started becoming my own person, I began realizing that I may not be very Christian, or maybe not at all. So seeing the same doubts and questions about faith in Xiomara was a very powerful and emotional experience for me. The last book that I read in February was If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Kawamura, and I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. So this book follows a man who suddenly finds out that he's terminally ill and that he only has weeks to live, and the devil appears before him and bargains with him that he can gain 1 extra day to live in exchange for one thing in the world that has to disappear forever. I actually read this book in an attempt to sort of rewire my brain and take me out of my reading slump, but all it ever achieved was making me really mad. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars because first, the story was actually very unique, and second, this is actually a translated work, so I'm giving this book the benefit of the doubt that a lot was lost in translation. Just reading a few pages, it was already clear that the original author's tone and prose was meant to be conversational. The translation ended up sounding odd and formal. It actually read like the old English textbooks that I used to have in high school. So grammatically, the translation was correct, but in terms of actually delivering the author's ideas and thoughts and intentions, it failed at that spectacularly. And it didn't help that the main character was one of the blandest, most uninspiring characters I've ever read. And the only time I ever felt anything from him was when he decided to die. On to the month of March. After the disappointment that was If Cats Disappeared from the World, I was determined to make March a better reading month for me, so I deliberately chose to read books that I knew I would like. The first book that I read in March was Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Once Upon a River is a magical realism story about a village whose peaceful serenity is disturbed when a little girl is rescued from a river. At first glance, they think that the girl is dead because she's not showing any signs of life, but after a few minutes, it turns out that she is alive. So aside from the mystery of the miracle of her resurrection, there's also the mystery of who she is, where she came from, and how she eventually ended up in the river. Once Upon a River was such a very cozy and atmospheric book, and it had a lot to do with Diane Satterfield's world building and a cast of very endearing characters. I really liked the book's rich storytelling. I like that the plot took its time unfolding but still had substantial events that contributed to the story and to the development of the characters. Once Upon a River has this consistently slow-paced plot that is not packed with event after main event, but rather it has these small, intimate, and character-driven moments that all connect with each other and all eventually lead up to this one momentous scene or event. And it's this kind of precise and slow storytelling that I really liked with this book. I also liked how the magical aspect just came naturally to the story. Diane Satterfield doesn't actually spend a lot of time explaining the magic in this book, but it's just so ingrained in the world and the lore and the characters' lives that it's believable even when it's not understandable. The second book that I read in March is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. So The Miniaturist is a mystery historical fiction loosely based on real people. So our main protagonist, Petronella Workman, is gifted this miniature dollhouse by her husband, and this dollhouse is an exact replica of her actual house. And when I say exact replica, I mean from the structure of the house and the placing of the rooms down to the patterns of the cushions on the chairs and the actual people themselves. It's really creepy shit, and as if things couldn't get creepier, Petronella starts noticing that there are things inside the dollhouse that are hints and clues about the lives and secrets of the real people that they represent. The Miniaturist was another very atmospheric and immersive book. It's pretty clear that Jessie Burton did a lot of research when writing this. The story takes place in Amsterdam during the 1680s, and she does a marvelous job with painting this world with all its history and economy and just this overall atmosphere during that time. I also liked how the dollhouse figures into the story, because during that time dollhouses were this sort of status symbol for women, so they would spend all this money and have figurines and small furniture custom made for their dollhouses, and so it was this way to flaunt their wealth and their status. Speaking of the dollhouse, I read in an interview that Jessie Burton did that the story of the Miniaturist came to her when she saw the actual dollhouse that the real Petronilla Urtman owned, and she was fascinated by the psychology surrounding this dollhouse. How a woman could spend so much time and effort and money on a dollhouse, and whether or not this dollhouse was in any way a reflection of Petronilla. A few facts about Petronilla Urtman's dollhouse. It took her 19 years to complete her dollhouse, and she went through 800 craftsmen and craftswomen. Also, the total amount that she spent on her miniature dollhouse is equivalent to the cost of an actual real house during that time. So in conclusion, I would very much like to be that Barbie girl living in that Barbie world. Hi, Editing Trish here. I just realized that I was so preoccupied doing that dancing bit that I wasn't able to talk about the rest of my review for The Miniaturist. So this is me once again trying to make sense for filming Trish because she doesn't have her priorities straight. So one aspect that I really liked about The Miniaturist was that I was just as clueless as the characters in the book because they were nowhere near figuring out what the fuck was going on. The characters, especially Petronella, were a bit annoying at first, but as the story progressed, there was this notable development to them that made me like them in the end. Also, the found family aspect and the characters' relationships with one another were definitely one of the book's strongest points and one of my favorites as well. And the last two books that I read for March were Stranger Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Delaney Taylor, and I gave both of them 5 out of 5 stars. So the Stranger Dreamer duology is a fantasy following Laszlo Strange, who is obsessed with stories, particularly about the myth about this ancient city that's disappeared and whose name has been cursed to be forgotten. Only it turns out that the myth is not a myth and that the city is in fact real. So Laszlo, along with this cast of very colorful and endearing characters, travel to said magical city, and more magical and amazing things happen. I first read Stranger Dreamer back in 2018, and I've been putting off reading Muse of Nightmares for almost 2 years because I was just nervous that it wouldn't live up. But I was so wrong, so delightfully wrong. Muse of Nightmares is such a fitting and satisfying conclusion to such a wonderful duology. Every aspect of this duology is magic in itself, but I especially loved the characters. I loved how in the second book, Nina's character was explored more. I also really liked the introduction of Nova and Cora's storyline. It was one of the most well-crafted surprises I've ever read. It was devastatingly good. Also, I really like happy endings. I'm always a slut for happy endings, so there's that too. Now to the month of April. The first book that I read in April was The Unexpected Everything by Morgan Matson, and I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. So I actually talked about The Unexpected Everything in my PhilMyth Readathon video, so I won't be spending too much time discussing this book. Basically, it's a fun and light contemporary following Andy, whose life has just fallen to chaos after her father is involved in a political scandal. The story was very fun and enjoyable. Unfortunately, the plot had this very problematic pace. Andy was a fine protagonist. My favorite part about the book was the friendship dynamics between her and her friends. The romance was meh. It was very bland. It was very uninspiring. I didn't feel anything for it. So in conclusion, fun and light read, but still had enough substance to make it memorable. The second book that I read for April was Educated by Tara Westover, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I also talked about this in a PhilMyth Readathon video, and I do plan on making a separate review for this, so I won't be talking too much about it. I will say, however, that alongside Poet X and Once Upon a River, Educated has guaranteed a spot on my favorite books of 2020 list, and also my favorite books of all time. Tara Westover's writing is very powerful and very visceral and just very devastating to read. The book was overall just very mind-opening, and I know it sounds corny but life-changing. It was just a very enriching reading experience for me. And the last book that I read for April was The Rise of the Empress series by Julie C. Dow. So there's the first book, Forest of a Thousand Lanterns, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. There's the second book, The Kingdom of the Blazing Phoenix, which I also gave 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book, Song of the Crimson Flower, which I also gave 4 out of 5 stars. The Rise of the Empress series is a retelling of Snow White. So in the first book, we follow Shifeng, who will eventually become the villain in the second book. But in the first book, her character is explored, and it tells the story of how she's struggling to keep her humanity while doing everything that she can to achieve her dream and become the person that she knows she can be. In the second book, we follow Jade, who goes on a magical quest to save her kingdom from the tyrannical Shifeng. And the third book is about this beautiful angsty romance between Bao and Lan, who also go on a magical quest to rid Bao of this curse that binds him to his flute. Overall, this was a very spectacular series. It features some of the most complex and well-written characters that I've ever read. Julie Dow's dissection and exploration of her protagonist was one of the strongest points of the series. These books also had magical and immersive world building. I liked how Julie Dow took inspiration from many Asian cultures, and this was reflected in the books. But going back to the characters, because really they are the crown jewel of these series. They're just so well written, and the minor characters are just as strongly portrayed as the main characters, and I absolutely love that. So that is it for my first quarterly wrap-up. I never know how to end these things.